What happens when a talented surgeon, trapped in an unhappy marriage, meets a homeless woman who can change his life forever? Gabriel's story is a journey of self-discovery and redemption, where each choice reveals not only his weaknesses but also the strength he didn't know he possessed. Gabriel is a 37-year-old surgeon, recognized for his skill and dedication, yet he feels exhausted and disillusioned. After a long and complex surgery on a baby, he finds himself reflecting on his life. Although he has achieved much in his career, his marriage to Giovanna has become a burden. She, always dissatisfied, constantly complains about the lack of attention and the gifts that never arrive. The pressure from his personal life begins to affect his professional performance, and in a moment of despair, Giovanna reveals that she had an affair and decides to leave Gabriel, asking for a divorce. The pain of this betrayal cuts through him like a blade, but instead of sinking into bitterness, he accepts the decision with dignity, throwing himself even deeper into his work. As days turn into weeks, Gabriel feels increasingly isolated. However, an unexpected encounter will change the course of his life. He attends to Aline, a homeless woman in urgent need of surgery. Ignoring the disapproving looks from his colleagues, he performs the operation and saves her life. Upon learning Aline's story, who was thrown out of her home by her stepdaughter after the death of her partner, Gabriel is touched by her situation. Determined to help her, he invites her to live in his home while she recovers. Aline, grateful for the second chance, quickly transforms from a mere patient into a loyal friend, sharing household tasks and bringing new light to Gabriel's life. As the two develop a deep friendship, Gabriel begins to confront his past traumas and realizes that Aline is not just someone in need. She is a strong and resilient woman capable of helping him heal his own emotional wounds. Together, they discover that Aline's dream house with her late partner is still for sale. Encouraged by the new perspective Aline brings to his life, Gabriel decides to buy the property. During the inspection, they come across a chest filled with jewels left by Davi, Aline's partner, a discovery that promises to turn their financial lives upside down. As time passes, Gabriel meets Carolina, a young woman he operates on due to an inflammation. Their relationship blossoms, bringing a new chapter to Gabriel's life. Meanwhile, Aline also rebuilds her life, securing a job and becoming an important figure for both Gabriel and Carolina. In the climax of the story, Gabriel and Carolina get married, and he finally understands that Aline's arrival was the turning point that saved him from loneliness and bitterness. Gabriel's story reflects on the choices we make, the unexpected twists life presents, and the strength we find in unexpected connections. Each character plays a crucial role in Gabriel's journey, and in the end, he realizes that true wealth lies not in possessions but in the relationships we cultivate and the love we give and receive. Gabriel was at a critical moment in his life. After Giovanna's betrayal, the pain and betrayal weighed on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He struggled to maintain the appearance of a successful surgeon, but each day became an internal battle. Although his work temporarily filled him, loneliness consumed him, and his mind wandered in a sea of uncertainties. With each new patient, he wondered if he was truly making a difference or merely hiding behind a lab coat. Aline's surgery brought a new breath of life, but not without its difficulties. In fact, her recovery journey was filled with challenges. Aline, a strong woman yet weakened by life on the streets, faced her own emotional battles. She felt lost, unsure of how to rebuild her life after the tragedy that had befallen her. Gabriel, for his part, found himself in a delicate position. He wanted to help but felt the weight of not knowing how to handle her pain while battling his own demons. As Aline recovered, Gabriel began to notice changes within himself. That woman, who initially seemed like a simple patient, was becoming a driving force in his life. But he also faced obstacles. The growing friendship between them was tested by Gabriel's insecurities. He wondered if he was doing enough for Aline or if he was merely benefiting from her presence. There was a fear that she would become emotionally dependent, something he deeply dreaded as he still struggled to cope with Giovanna's betrayal. The situation became even more complicated when Carolina entered the scene. The young patient, with a vibrant spirit and contagious energy, became a new light in Gabriel's life. She was there, battling an inflammation, but her strength and determination were inspiring. Gabriel felt drawn to her, but his mind was conflicted. He didn't want to rush into a new relationship while still dealing with the pain of the past. The dilemma between moving on and respecting his grief for Giovanna left him confused. Aline, noticing the growing connection between Gabriel and Carolina, began to feel out of place. She didn't want to be a burden, but she also didn't want to lose the friendship that had formed between them. This insecurity forced her to confront her own emotions. The friendship that once seemed unshakable was now being tested, and Aline felt like an intruder in Gabriel's life. The tension mounted, and the sense that something was slipping away lingered in the air. Gabriel, for his part, tried to balance his feelings for Carolina and his friendship with Aline. He wanted to be a loyal friend but also felt that Aline needed more than he could offer. The line between friendship and charity was becoming increasingly thin. The pressure mounted as he tried to please both, but the truth was that he was distancing himself from himself. The fear of disappointing Aline and the pressure to be the hero in Carolina's life left him anxious. When Aline finally discussed her feelings with Gabriel, the atmosphere grew tense. What had been a light and encouraging friendship transformed into a conversation filled with insecurities and fears. Aline expressed her worry that Gabriel was drifting away from her, while Gabriel tried to explain that his connection with Carolina did not diminish Aline's importance in his life. But as he spoke, he realized that his words were not enough to calm the emotional storm brewing. The situation escalated when Aline, feeling rejected, decided it was time to seek her own independence. She began to withdraw, accepting a job at a shelter for homeless people. Gabriel was devastated, feeling that he had failed in his promise to be a friend. The weight of guilt consumed him, leading him to question whether he truly had what it took to care for others when he could barely care for himself. Meanwhile, Carolina, noticing the shift in dynamics, tried to get closer to Gabriel. However, her attempts were often met with coldness, as he was trapped in his own thoughts. Gabriel's internal struggle was becoming a barrier that affected not only his work but also his personal relationships. He felt like he was on an emotional roller coaster, unable to find the balance necessary to move forward. Gabriel's internal conflict grew each day, forcing him to confront his beliefs about love, friendship, and what it truly meant to be a hero. The struggle to find his true identity intensified, and he realized he needed to make difficult decisions. The quest for overcoming obstacles became a challenge not only for his heart but also for his soul. He was at a turning point where each choice could lead him to a new life or to an even deeper abyss of loneliness and regret. The tension increased when Aline started working at the shelter. Gabriel tried to support her decision, but inside him, a storm was brewing. He wondered if she was doing it out of necessity or if she really wanted to distance herself from him. Every time he thought about it, a knot formed in his stomach. Insecurity consumed him, and he questioned whether there was anything he could do to regain her trust. However, the fear of rejection prevented him from acting. He became increasingly withdrawn, and his interactions with Carolina turned superficial, as if he were merely fulfilling an obligation. Aline, for her part, was facing her own demons. Working at the shelter made her feel needed, but it also confronted her with her own fragility. She remembered life on the streets, the challenges she faced, and the promises she made to herself to never feel vulnerable again. The work at the shelter was filled with emotional and physical challenges, and amid these battles, she felt alone. The friendship she had with Gabriel was a safe haven, but now, with the distance between them, she wondered if she had really made the right choice by stepping away. The pressure mounted for both of them. Gabriel, trying to cope with Aline's absence, began to feel the weight of his own loneliness. He felt trapped in a cycle of self-criticism and doubt, and with each new day, the idea of seeking professional help became more appealing. However, he hesitated, convinced he needed to resolve everything on his own. Pride became an obstacle, and he didn't want to admit he was struggling. Carolina, noticing the change in Gabriel's behavior, decided to take the initiative. She offered to be a closer friend, trying to bring some lightness into his life. But Gabriel, still trapped in his pain, couldn't fully open up. The connection between them made sense, but he was so focused on the friendship he was losing that he couldn't see the possibilities of something more. Carolina's positive energy was a balm, but Gabriel wasn't ready to heal. Things reached a critical point when Aline, noticing the distance between them and the lack of communication, decided to confront Gabriel. In an unexpected meeting, she expressed her frustration and sadness. Gabriel, stunned, realized he could no longer bear the pressure of being everything to everyone. Aline's words were a cry for help, and he saw that she was also hurting. The weight of expectations and insecurities was about to explode, and he knew he had to make a choice. The choice wouldn't be easy. Gabriel was at a turning point where the past and future collided. He needed to decide whether to allow himself to be vulnerable and accept that he needed help, or to continue isolating himself, suffocating his feelings in a sea of loneliness. As he pondered, the emotional storm inside him grew, and he knew the time to act was now. He needed to find a way to balance his friendship with Aline and his growing affection for Carolina, but first and foremost, he had to look within and confront his own limitations. The journey of personal overcoming was just beginning. Gabriel sat in a cafe, the smell of fresh coffee and the noise of conversations around him hardly affected him. He looked out the window, lost in thought. The sunlight streamed in, but it couldn't illuminate the darkness that was accumulating inside him. The encounter with Aline still reverberated in his mind. The words she had said, the pain in her eyes, everything made him feel an overwhelming weight on his chest. He knew the conversation had been necessary, but he also knew he didn't have the answers she expected. Meanwhile, Aline, after the meeting, decided to open up to one of her colleagues at the shelter. She needed to vent. She needed someone to listen. Through tears, she shared about her friendship with Gabriel and how everything seemed to have collapsed. Her colleague, a wise woman, listened attentively and, at the end, said something that stuck in Aline's mind. Sometimes, what you see as failure is actually an opportunity to be reborn. These words began to echo in Aline, prompting her to reflect on her own life, her choices, and what she truly wanted. Gabriel, for his part, found himself in a dilemma. He thought of Carolina. Her vibrant energy was a reminder of how life could be light and fun. But how could he open up to her when he still carried the weight of his friendship with Aline? He felt torn, and the guilt of thinking about moving on without Aline consumed him. He was at a breaking point. What did he really want? What was friendship? What did it mean to love someone? These questions tormented him, and he knew he needed answers. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Gabriel received a call from the hospital. One of the patients he had recently operated on was experiencing complications. The urgency of the situation sent a chill down his spine, but more than that, it made him feel alive again. He remembered what truly mattered: saving lives. That was the essence of what he did, and for a moment, the shadows that haunted him seemed to dissipate. When he arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere was tense, but the team was united, working together. Gabriel felt part of something bigger, something important. During the surgery, he focused completely, putting his worries aside. Hours passed like minutes, and when he finally finished, the sense of relief and accomplishment was palpable. The patient was stable. The team congratulated him, and he realized that even amid chaos, there was still beauty in his work. In that moment, a revelation struck him. He couldn't be everything to everyone. He had to learn to accept his limitations. The friendship with Aline was important, but he couldn't carry the weight of her pain. From that day on, he decided he needed to allow himself to be vulnerable. He wanted to help Aline, but he also needed to take care of himself. The first step would be to talk to her again, this time with a more open heart. Meanwhile, Aline, inspired by her conversation with her colleague, decided that she also needed to confront her fears. The next day, she signed up for a support group for people facing emotional challenges. As she shared her story with others, she realized that she was not alone. Each account touched her deeply, and with each meeting, she felt a little stronger. The pain that once seemed unbearable was now part of her journey, and the idea of rebirth was beginning to make sense. The road would not be easy, but Aline was determined to fight for herself and for her friendship with Gabriel. As she grew stronger, Gabriel was also preparing to take a step forward. He knew he needed to find balance, but now he had a new understanding. Failures and insecurities do not define who we are, but rather how we choose to face them. Both were, therefore, undergoing a process of transformation. The choices they would make from then on would shape not only the future of their friendships, but also their own lives. The journey of personal overcoming was just beginning, and for the first time in a long time, both felt a spark of hope. The upcoming reunion promised to be a turning point, not only for their friendship but for each of their individual growth. Gabriel sat at his work desk, the hospital lights softly flickering in the background, as if reflecting the new clarity in his mind. After the successful surgery, he felt he had found a purpose that had been lost in recent weeks. The adrenaline from the operation still pulsed through his veins, and for the first time in a long time, he felt lighter. But this lightness did not mean his concerns for Aline had disappeared. On the contrary, he was now more aware of the need to reconnect with her, but he was also determined not to lose himself in the process. He knew that the upcoming conversation would not be easy. The pain Aline felt was still very present, and he feared that by trying to open up, he might end up hurting her even more. Yet, at the same time, he understood that he needed to be honest about his own feelings. With a deep sigh, he picked up his phone and decided to send Aline a message proposing a meeting. Her response did not come immediately, but Gabriel felt it was a necessary step. Meanwhile, Aline was also undergoing a process of transformation. After the support group meetings, she felt she was rising again. The stories of others inspired her, and she began to see her own experiences in a new light. During one of the sessions, an older woman shared her struggle with depression and how she had learned to accept her emotions. Aline listened attentively, absorbing every word, and felt that, like this woman, she too could allow herself to feel pain but not let it govern her life. That day, upon returning home, Aline looked in the mirror and saw a stronger version of herself. But the anxiety of reuniting with Gabriel consumed her. What would she say? How would he react? The idea that their friendship could change scared her, but at the same time, the excitement of finally addressing her emotions made her feel alive. The day of the meeting was approaching, and Aline decided that she would be honest with him, no matter what that meant for both of them. On the day of the meeting, Gabriel arrived at the cafe where they used to meet. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and conversation, but he felt as if he were in a bubble, isolated from everything around him. When Aline entered, his heart raced. She was a bit nervous but also determined. As they sat down, the silence between them carried significant weight, but both knew they needed to break it. Gabriel began to speak, expressing his gratitude for Aline and how her friendship had always been important to him. He tried to explain the confusion he felt, the weight of guilt, and the need to take care of himself. Aline listened attentively, her emotions close to the surface. When it was her turn, she spoke about her own struggles and how she was beginning to learn to love herself again. Her words were sincere, and Gabriel realized that even though their paths were changing, the connection they had was still strong. However, the meeting was not without obstacles. Aline, in a moment of vulnerability, mentioned Carolina, and Gabriel felt a pang of jealousy. He knew Aline had every right to feel that way, but it made him reflect on the complexities of his feelings. He wanted Aline to be happy, but he also wanted her to understand his own needs. This new dynamic between them was becoming a challenge, and Gabriel realized he would need time and patience to find the balance he was seeking. The following weeks were a period of adjustments for both. Aline continued to attend her support group, where each meeting helped her grow stronger. She began to make small progress, but still struggled against the echoes of her old insecurities. Meanwhile, Gabriel tried to open up to Carolina, but the shadow of his friendship with Aline followed him. He felt torn, and the interactions with Carolina, which should have been light and fun, often left him confused. In a moment of introspection, Gabriel decided he needed to talk to Carolina about Aline. He wanted to be honest about what was happening in his life, but he feared that this might push her away. When they finally sat down to talk, he explained his situation. To his surprise, Carolina not only understood but also offered her support. This conversation helped Gabriel realize that he did not have to choose between the two. He could find a way to be friends with Aline while also exploring something new with Carolina. Aline, for her part, began to feel more confident in her journey. She realized that the pain and difficulties she had faced would not define her. With each step towards self-acceptance, she started to release the weight she had carried for so long. The path ahead was still uncertain, but now she was willing to embrace change. Both Gabriel and Aline were in a moment of transition, facing new challenges and learning to navigate their emotions. Their interactions became deeper, and despite the difficulties, there was a new hope in the air. They began to understand that although friendship and love could be complicated, honesty and mutual support could guide them in their individual and collective journeys. Gabriel felt that life was giving him a second chance. After the surgery, not only had his health improved, but so had his perspective. He was determined not to let the difficulties of the past shape his future. The weight of guilt and uncertainties still bore down on his shoulders, but the experience had taught him something valuable: the importance of being honest with himself and with others. As he strived to reconnect with Aline, Gabriel began to realize that self-confidence was slowly blossoming within him. He remembered how he had hesitated to send that message to Aline, but upon doing so, he felt a wave of relief. Each conversation they had, each moment of vulnerability, was an opportunity to grow stronger. He was learning to accept his emotions, even when they were confusing, and this encouraged him to speak more openly about his insecurities. Aline, in turn, was also undergoing a process of transformation. The support group meetings had become a safe space where she could explore her feelings without fear of judgment. With each gathering, she felt stronger, more capable of facing the shadows of her old life. The pain that once paralyzed her began to be seen as a part of her journey, not as an unbearable burden. Aline started to realize that true strength lay not in hiding her weaknesses, but in accepting them and learning from them. In a moment of reflection, Aline decided she needed to be honest with Gabriel about her feelings. The anxiety that consumed her was slowly replaced by renewed determination. She no longer wanted to live in the shadow of her insecurities. When she met Gabriel, she sat down in front of him and, with a firm gaze, began to open her heart. Talking about her experiences, her pains, and her hopes was not easy, but in doing so, she felt liberated. It was as if each word was another step on the ladder of her recovery. Gabriel listened attentively, absorbing every word. He realized that, like Aline, he also needed to continue to open up and be true to himself. By sharing his vulnerabilities, he was helping Aline feel more comfortable doing the same. Their friendship was evolving, and with it, a new understanding emerged. They were not just two people dealing with their own battles. Together, they were creating a space where they could grow and support each other. The following weeks were filled with small new beginnings. Gabriel began to engage more in activities that had previously made him nervous. He decided to enroll in a photography course, something he had always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. By capturing moments and expressing his creativity, he found a new way to connect with himself. Photography became a form of healing, allowing him to explore his emotions visually. Through the lens, Gabriel began to see the beauty in life's imperfections, both in himself and in others. Aline, for her part, decided she wanted to help others who, like her, were struggling. Inspired by her experiences, she began volunteering at a local shelter. Working with people facing difficulties made her realize how far she had come. Each smile she received in return for her support motivated her to keep going. Aline began to understand that success was not just about personal achievements, but also about making a difference in the lives of others. As both moved forward in their journeys, the life lessons they learned began to intertwine. Gabriel and Aline realized that the friendship they shared was a source of strength. They were supporting each other, helping one another face their fears and open up to new possibilities. This new dynamic brought a sense of hope, and the fear of losing the connection they had started to dissipate. Gabriel and Aline were no longer the same people who had sat in that cafe for the first time after the traumatic events. They had faced their difficulties, learned to accept themselves, and supported each other. Through their struggles, they found a new perspective on life, and that transformed them. The future was still uncertain, but now, together, they were ready to face it. With the courage to open up and the determination to grow, Gabriel and Aline were prepared to explore what life had to offer, knowing they didn't have to do it alone. Gabriel was at a point in his life where everything seemed to be changing. He had opened himself up to new experiences, but now he was confronted with a challenge that made him hesitate. Aline, always by his side, was about to present at a volunteer event where she would share her story of overcoming adversity. Gabriel knew Aline needed his support, but the idea of speaking in public terrified him. He felt he wasn't ready to face that battle yet. That morning, as he prepared for the event, Gabriel looked out the window and reflected on his journey to this point. He had become stronger, but insecurity still accompanied him. Aline had become a source of inspiration, and he didn't want to let her down by not being there. The dilemma intensified. Should he face his fears and go, or stay in his comfort zone? When he arrived at the event venue, the bright lights and the crowd made him nervous. However, upon seeing Aline, his heart warmed. She was radiant, full of expectation, but a look of anxiety crossed her face when she spotted him. Gabriel summoned his courage and approached. Aline's smile eased some of his worries. He knew he needed to be there for her. The event began, and the energy in the air was palpable. Various people shared their stories, and each account seemed to bring new light to the atmosphere. When it was Aline's turn, she took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. Gabriel watched her from the back of the room, his heart beating fast. He saw Aline speak with sincerity and vulnerability, and he realized that every word she uttered was a reflection of his own journey. It touched him deeply, but as Aline spoke, something unexpected happened. In the middle of her presentation, she began to hesitate. Insecurity took over, and the fear of not being heard appeared in her eyes. Gabriel felt a strong impulse within himself. He knew he had to do something. Those words Aline was struggling to express were important, and he couldn't let her be alone in that moment. In an act of courage, he stood up and walked toward the stage. The crowd watched with curiosity as he approached Aline. He positioned himself next to her, and in an instant, the fear he felt before disappeared. Gabriel took her hand and, looking into her eyes, began to speak. He shared his own experience of struggle and how Aline had inspired him to face his insecurities. He spoke about the strength he had found in their friendship and how it had helped him rise again. Aline looked at him, surprised but at the same time relieved. Gabriel's words encouraged her, and the connection they had strengthened in that moment. Together, they began to talk about the importance of opening up, not just to each other but to the world. They were an example that, even amid challenges, friendship and mutual support could create a safe space for everyone to grow. As they spoke, the energy in the room shifted. The crowd began to applaud, and this gave Aline the confidence she needed. Together, they shared their stories, and the vulnerability that had once felt like a burden became a powerful strength. What had started as a moment of insecurity transformed into a celebration of overcoming and friendship. When they finished, the audience stood, applauding enthusiastically. Gabriel and Aline exchanged glances, and a smile lit up their faces. They had faced their fears and supported each other, and this experience brought them even closer together. In that moment, Gabriel realized that true wealth was not in avoiding challenges but in facing them hand in hand with someone who cares. Thus, Gabriel and Aline's journey culminated in a new understanding of life. They were no longer just victims of their circumstances, they were survivors, ready to embrace the future with courage and hope. The transformation they experienced was not only about them but also about everyone around them. They learned that the most valuable lessons in life come from human connection and the power of friendship. And together, they were ready to face any challenge that life still had in store for them. After the emotional climax on stage, where Gabriel and Aline united to share their stories, the energy in the room began to dissipate, but the impact of that experience remained. The audience, still buzzing with the sincerity of what they had just witnessed, surrounded the two as they left the stage. Expressions of gratitude were evident. Many approached to congratulate them and share how their words resonated in their own lives. Gabriel felt a mix of relief and euphoria. Aline, by his side, was radiant, her eyes sparkling with a blend of emotion and happiness. It was as if, together, they had managed to break a veil of insecurity that surrounded them. However, as the warmth of acceptance enveloped them, Gabriel couldn't help but think about the consequences of his decision to join Aline at that critical moment. He had faced his fears and, in doing so, discovered a new strength within himself. As they talked to the people, Aline turned to Gabriel and said, "You know, I never thought I would need you in that moment. But you were there, and it made all the difference." Gabriel smiled but felt a weight in his heart. "I wasn't prepared either, Aline. But deep down, I realized I couldn't leave you alone. Your courage inspired me to be brave too." After a few conversations and shared smiles, they stepped away from the crowd to a quieter corner. Aline looked at Gabriel, a grateful expression on her face. "I can't believe I did it. You helped me find my voice, even when I thought I didn't have one. You always had a voice, Aline." "I just reminded you of that," Gabriel replied, feeling more secure in his own vulnerability. He realized that by supporting her, he had also found his own path to self-confidence. The connection between them intensified, and they both understood that this experience was not just an isolated event but the beginning of a new phase in their lives. As they talked, Gabriel reflected on the challenges still to come. He knew that the battle against insecurity would not end there. Life would continue to present new obstacles. However, he also realized that he had Aline by his side and that together they could face whatever came their way. "What do you think about starting a support group? Something where we can help others share their stories, just like we did today?" Gabriel suggested, the idea resonating in his mind. Aline smiled, her eyes sparkling again. "That would be amazing. We can help so many people, Gabriel. And at the same time, continue to support each other. We can create a network of strength and friendship." The enthusiasm between them grew as they discussed how they could turn this idea into reality. From that day on, they not only became closer friends but also partners in a new mission. The desire to help others find their voices united them even more. In the days that followed, Gabriel began to feel a profound change within himself. He not only gained more confidence in public speaking, but he also became more open and receptive to his own emotions. The struggle that once seemed so great now felt lighter because he knew he was not alone. Aline also transformed. Her journey of overcoming became a source of motivation for many, and that made her feel alive and full of purpose. The impact of that presentation was not only on their lives but also on the lives of the people around them. Those who listened were inspired to share their own stories, and a cycle of support and friendship began to form. Gabriel and Aline realized they had created something larger than themselves. They had started a chain of courage and empathy. At the end of that week, Gabriel sat in his room, reflecting on everything that had happened. He realized that the challenges that once terrified him were no longer the same. He had found strength in his vulnerability and, more importantly, had learned that true courage is facing fears together. With a smile on his face, he looked at Aline, who was sitting beside him, and said, "We are just getting started, aren't we?" Aline nodded, and together, they prepared for what the future held for them. After all, they had discovered that true transformation doesn't come from the absence of fear but from the willingness to face it, always together. Gabriel and Aline, united by a transformative experience, not only found courage but also discovered the power of friendship. Over the following weeks, their lives changed in ways they had never imagined. Gabriel, who once felt trapped in his insecurity, now spoke in public with renewed confidence. He realized that true strength did not come from the absence of fear but from the willingness to confront it. Every new conversation he had, every story he heard, was one more step in his journey of self-discovery. Aline, in turn, experienced an equally significant transformation. Her fears, which once paralyzed her, became fuel for her determination. The desire to help others awakened a purpose she never knew existed within her. Together, they created a support group that quickly became a safe space for many people seeking to share their stories and experiences. The positive energy emanating from that place was palpable, and the connection among the participants was profound. The impact of their actions spread throughout the community, and soon many began to join them. Gabriel and Aline became known not only for their stories of overcoming challenges but also for the love and support they offered to everyone around them. They saw how their lives intertwined with others, creating a solid network of friendship and courage. For Gabriel, this meant that he was not only helping others but also helping himself at the same time. Every shared story was a victory, not just for the speaker but for everyone who listened. In moments of reflection, Gabriel would sit in his room and think about how everything had changed. He remembered the nights when he felt alone and fearful, and how now life was filled with light and hope. The transformation he experienced went beyond the simple act of speaking in public. It was a journey of acceptance and self-love. He learned that everyone carries their own battles and that by sharing them, it is possible to dismantle the barriers that separate us. Aline also felt the difference in her life. Her voice, once timid, now resonated with confidence. Her friendship with Gabriel not only encouraged her but also made her realize that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. Together, they were building a legacy of empathy and support, showing everyone that it is possible to overcome challenges when you have someone by your side. At the end of that journey, Gabriel and Aline looked at each other with a satisfied smile. They knew the road ahead still had twists and challenges, but now they were ready to face them together. The happiness they felt was contagious, and the certainty that each step taken had a purpose filled them with gratitude. Now, reflecting on everything they had learned, they invited people to share their own stories, to find their voices, and to unite in the fight against insecurity. It was a heartfelt appeal for more people to join them, contributing to this chain of courage and love. So, if you feel inspired by this journey of overcoming and friendship, don't hesitate. Share your own story or that of someone you admire. Click like and subscribe to the channel. Your participation is essential for stories like this to continue being told. Together, we can create a space where every voice is heard and valued. The change starts now, and you can be a part of it.